Hello, my name is Gary, and I was raised in the Western United States, so I'm a native English speaker. I hope that you will enjoy this YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
Three Little Kittens by Katharine PYLE, 1863–1938. Jazbury sat on the kitchen steps, sulking. He didn't think Aunt Tabby had any right to tap his ears. To make things worse, his mother had scolded him instead of feeling sorry for him. It just wasn't fair. He was always getting in trouble. Well, he'd run away. That's what he'd do. He'd leave and never come back. Then they'd be sorry. Maybe they'd even cry. He hoped they would. He'd be glad if they did. Suddenly, Fluffy's small white face peeked over the fence. "Hey, Jazbury." Jazbury didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Hey." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." "Then why do you look so upset?" "I'm not upset." Fluffy climbed over the fence and sat next to Jazbury. He glanced at him a few times but didn't say much. He was a little scared of Jazbury when he was in one of his moods. "Why don't you come play in my yard?" Fluffy asked after a while. "Don't want to." Just then they heard a scratching sound on the fence between the yard and the lot, and a third kitten, a big yellow one, scrambled up and perched on one of the fence posts. It was Yowler. "Hey, Jaz," he called out in a loud voice that gave him his name. "Hey," replied Jazbury, still sulking. Yowler ignored Fluffy and grinned. "I've got something to tell you." "What?" "Can't tell you here. Come over to the lot and I'll tell you." "Can't." "Why not?" "Just can't." "Oh, come on." "I told you I can't. I've got to sit here for a while." "Why?" "Because I said so." Yowler jumped down into the yard and walked over, sitting beside Jazbury. Fluffy moved away a bit. Yowler was pretty dirty. "You should go home, Fluffy," Yowler said. "Me and Jaz need to talk." "I don't have to go unless I want to," Fluffy snapped, puffing up. "Right, Jazbury?" "Yeah, so if you've got something to say, Yowler, just say it." "I don't want him to tell." "Oh, just go ahead," Jazbury said impatiently. "He won't tell, will you, Fluffy?" "Of course not." "Well," Yowler looked around cautiously, "I'm running away." Jazbury's eyes widened. Running away? That was exactly what he had been thinking about. "Yeah, I'm sick of hanging around the baker's shop catching mice for him. He can catch his own mice. I'm done." "Where are you going to go?" "I don't know. Maybe to the woods for a while. Want to come? It'll be fun." "The woods?" Fluffy chimed in. "You can't live there. You'd get rained on and soaked." "Oh, be quiet," Yowler growled. "I'm not talking to you. So what do you say, Jaz? There are plenty of places to live. Hollow trees and stuff. There are birds, field mice, fish. We'd have a great time." "But you don't know how to get there," said Jazbury. "Sure I do. A guy brought me from the country when I was just a little kitten. We passed some woods on the way and I could find my way back easily. Come on, Jaz, it'll be great, I promise." "I guess I'd be up for it," Jazbury said slowly. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow morning, as soon as the baker opens his shop so I can get out." "You should come too, Fluffy," Jazbury said suddenly. "I'll go if you will." "Oh no," Fluffy mewed, but Yowler interrupted. "He can't come. He's too much of a mama's boy. We don't want him." "Yes, we do, and I'm not going unless he comes. Come on, Fluffy, it'll be fun. And if we don't like it, we can always come back. Let's go." After a lot of convincing, Fluffy finally agreed, but only if Yowler promised he could come home whenever he wanted. He also made Yowler swear they'd come right back if they couldn't find shelter by nightfall. It was decided that the three of them would meet in the lot the next morning, as soon as possible after breakfast. Yowler wanted to leave before breakfast, but Fluffy refused. Jazbury also thought it was a good idea to have one last saucer of milk before they left. There probably wouldn't be much milk in the woods. That night, Jazbury couldn't settle down. He was too excited to sleep properly. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed he was running down a road towards the woods, with a dog chasing him, then two dogs, then three. He clawed at the ground, trying to pull himself forward, but his paws felt stuck. Just as the first dog reached him, grabbing hold, he heard somebody calling, "Jazbury, Jazbury, wake up. You must be having a nightmare. You're mewing so much." He opened his eyes to find himself safe in the cosy cellar at home, with Auntie Tabby patting him and telling him to wake up. Jazbury was still shaking and breathing heavily from the fears of his dream. "What were you dreaming about, dear?" his mother asked. "Oh, nothing," Jazbury replied. "Just something about dogs." Then he curled up next to his mother and fell back asleep, this time without any more dreams to disturb him. When Jazbury woke up the next morning, sunlight streamed through the cellar window, birds were singing, and the air was fresh with morning dew. His bad dreams from the night before were completely forgotten. It couldn't have been a more perfect day for three little kittens to start their adventure. The three of them met in the lot right after breakfast, as they had planned. Yowler quickly took charge. "All right, kits," he said, "we're not going to go together in a group. That would look suspicious, and somebody would definitely notice us. I'll go first, Fluffy can follow, and then Jazz. Fluffy, stay about half a block behind me, and Jazz, stay half a block behind Fluffy. That way you'll still see where I'm going, but no one will think we're all together." The others agreed to the plan. "What if we run into some dogs?" Fluffy asked. "If you do, you'll just have to figure it out. Run into an alley or climb a fence. Now let's get moving. We'll walk to the edge of the lot together." The three kittens snuck through the weeds, and when they reached the edge of the lot, Jazbury and Fluffy stopped. They watched as Yowler crossed the street and turned a corner. After waiting a moment, Fluffy followed, and then Jazbury. By the time Jazbury turned the corner, Yowler was quite far up the street, and Fluffy wasn't too far ahead. Two women with brooms were sweeping their sidewalks and chatting as they worked. "Look at that kitten," one of them said as Jazbury ran by. "That's the third kitten that's passed in the last few minutes." "I know, I saw that too," replied the other. "Strange, I wonder where they're all coming from." As Jazbury neared the next corner, he heard loud voices and then the bark of a dog. A group of boys was coming that way, and the dog was with them, just around the corner. Luckily, there was an alley nearby. Jazbury quickly darted into it and crouched down, just as the rough-looking boys and their dogs passed by. None of them thought to check the alley, so Jazbury waited until their voices faded, then slipped out and continued on. Yowler and Fluffy were far ahead now, and he had to hurry to catch up. A little while later, Fluffy had a close call. He was walking past a small brown house when the door opened, and out came a little girl, followed by an ugly dog. The dog spotted Fluffy almost immediately. With a half yelp, half bark, it charged after him. Fluffy saw it coming, and with no fence or alley nearby, ran for a tree a little further down the street, his tail puffed up and every hair on end. The dog was right on his heels when Fluffy scrambled up the tree, clinging to the trunk, while the dog jumped and barked below. Jazbury watched from behind some steps, trembling with fear. It looked like the dog could catch Fluffy at any moment. Fluffy hung onto the tree, too scared to climb higher in case he lost his grip and fell into the dog's jaws. The little girl had been yelling at the dog. Now she found a stick, ran up and hit him until he whined and moved a short distance away. However, he didn't go far. He stood watching eagerly as the girl tried to coax Fluffy down from the tree. But Fluffy wouldn't budge. He had scrambled up to a fork in the tree, sat there meowing. Just then the door of the house opened and a woman looked out. "Pansy," she called to the child, "go get me the yeast cake, I'm waiting for it." "But Mum, there's a kitten up in the tree." "I can't help that, just go and hurry up. Almost time for school." Reluctantly, the little girl left the tree and walked down the street, around the corner. Thankfully, she took the dog with her. Carefully and cautiously, Jazbury crept along the gutter to the base of the tree. "Hurry, Fluffy," he meowed. "Come down, we need to get away before the dog comes back." "Oh, I'm scared," wailed Fluffy. "I want to go home. Mew, mew." "Don't cry," Jazbury called impatiently. "You can't get home now, and if you don't hurry, the dog will be back." Encouraged, Fluffy managed to scramble down the tree, half falling, and he and Jazbury hurried down the street as fast as they could. They reached the end of the village, where Yowler was waiting for them. "What took you so long?" he meowed crossly. "I've been waiting forever." "A dog almost caught Fluffy," Jazbury replied, telling Yowler the story of Fluffy's adventure. "Wasn't that awful?" he asked. "Oh, I don't know. He didn't catch him anyway," Yowler said impatiently. "We'll be in the field soon, and then we can all stick together. No one will see us there." A little later they had completely left the village behind. Before them lay a sunny expanse of countryside with a meadow, a stream, a field, and in the distance the dark edge of a shady wood. The kitten slipped through a fence and into the tall grass of the meadow. Insects buzzed around them. A butterfly fluttered by, so close, when Jazbury leapt for it, he almost caught it. He wanted to chase some of the insects flitting about, but Yowler told him to wait. "There are plenty of other things to catch," he said. "Bigger things we can actually eat." "Isn't this fun, Fluffy?" Jazbury exclaimed. "Aren't you glad we came?" "Yes, it's fun," Fluffy replied, though he didn't seem as enthusiastic as Jazbury. Soon Yowler sneaked away through the grass. They watched as he pounced. A moment later, he returned with a small field mouse in his mouth. "What did I tell you?" he purred proudly. "Guess we won't starve here. The fields are full of them." They shared the field mouse, even though none of them were hungry. It was enjoyable to eat outside in the meadow with the blue sky overhead and the warm winds ruffling their fur. Afterward they continued on at their leisure, making side trips through the grass or stopping to rest and sun themselves in the open spots. They didn't reach the woods until late afternoon, and by then they were hungry again. Fluffy managed to catch a small bird, which delighted the other two. "Isn't he a great hunter? What did I tell you?" Jazbury boasted. After they finished the bird, Yowler told the others to wait while he found a place for them to sleep. Once he left, the two younger kittens fell silent. Dusk was settling in. The woods felt so big, dark and lonely. Jazbury thought about his mother and Aunt Tabby. They must have missed him by now. How worried they would be. There would be fresh milk waiting in the pantry. They were probably having their supper now, but maybe they were too sad to eat. Fluffy snuggled close to him. "Jazbury," he whispered. "Yes? Don't you wish we were home?" "Well, I wouldn't mind it." "Let's go home. Let's leave before Yowler gets back." "No, that would be mean. Maybe tomorrow, only I don't know the way." "Meow, ow, ow." Yowler's loud voice broke the silence of the woods. "Come over here, kittens. I've found a great place to sleep." The other kittens hurried toward the sound of his voice and found him standing in front of a hollow tree. Inside there was a bed of moss and dry leaves, snug and warm. The three kittens crawled in and cuddled together, soon fast asleep, worn out from their journey and all the adventures they had experienced. Jazbury opened his eyes and looked around. For a moment he couldn't remember where he was. Instead of the whitewashed walls and beams of the cellar, the tree's sides arched above him, and Fluffy was curled up close to him instead of Mother Bunch and Aunt Tabby. Then it came back to him. He had run away. He was in the woods. But where was Yowler? He had been there when Jazbury fell asleep. Yowler hadn't left them behind. "Fluffy," he mewed. Without opening his eyes, Fluffy let out a sleepy little mew in response. He stretched and yawned, revealing his tiny pink tongue curled inside his mouth. Then he opened his eyes. "Well, Jazbury," he said, surprised. He looked around, startled. "I forgot we ran away. Where's Yowler?" "I don't know. Let's call him." Just then Yowler strolled around from behind the tree. "Hello, kittens," he said, looking comfortable and lazy. He was licking his lips, and a tiny feather stuck to one of his whiskers. "Where have you been?" Jazbury asked. "Oh, I just went out to look around." "Well, I'm hungry. What should we do about breakfast?" "Yes, what should we do about breakfast?" Fluffy echoed. "Oh, you'll have to catch something. There's plenty in the woods." "Aren't you going to help us?" Jazbury asked anxiously. "No, I'm not hungry. You kittens go ahead. You won't have any trouble. If I want anything, I'll catch it later." "But I don't know how to catch things. I've never learned," Jazbury admitted. "That's your problem, not mine," Yowler replied cruelly. Fluffy had been watching Yowler closely. Now he said, "Yowler, there's a feather on your whiskers." Yowler jumped. "Oh, is there?" he said, hastily wiping it off with his paw. "You'd better hurry up if you want to catch something," he added. "I'm sleepy. I think I'll take another nap." He went inside the tree, curled up in the warm spot that Jazbury and Fluffy had just left, and closed his eyes. The two smaller kittens stood there for a moment looking at him. "Come on, Jazbury," Fluffy mewed. "Let's go find something to eat." The two little kittens wandered away from the tree and deeper into the woods. Jazbury felt hurt that Yowler wouldn't come with them. He didn't understand why Yowler wasn't hungry too. "I know why he isn't hungry," Fluffy said mysteriously. "Why?" "Oh, I'll tell you sometime." "Why won't you tell me now?" I don't want to, but I'll tell you later. Jazbury looked around. I don't see where we can find anything to eat, he mewed. I do right now, Fluffy whispered. Shush, keep quiet. He crept silently through the bushes when suddenly there was a leap, a squeak, a flutter, and a moment later Fluffy returned proudly with a young bird in his mouth. Oh yay, cried Jazbury. I love bird. I've only tasted it once. Aunt Tabby caught one in the yard at home and gave me a piece. Won't Yowler be pleased? Let's hurry back and have breakfast together. Fluffy dropped the bird and placed his paw on it. I'm not giving Yowler any, he declared. What? Not give Yowler any? Oh, Fluffy, why not? Because, Fluffy replied, I was going to tell you something earlier. I'm sure Yowler caught a bird this morning and ate it all himself before we woke up. Jazbury could hardly believe it. Oh, Fluffy, he wouldn't be that mean, he exclaimed. Well, I think he would. Don't you remember the feather on his whiskers? Anyway, you might as well eat your share of the bird because I won't give Yowler even a single bone, whether you eat any or not. So the two little friends sat on the soft moss and divided the bird. It was delicious, but Jazbury felt guilty for treating Yowler badly. He couldn't believe Yowler would catch a bird and eat it without telling them. After finishing, Fluffy sat down to wash himself. You should wash too, Jazbury, he said. Look how dirty your fur is. I don't care, Jazbury replied. I didn't come to the woods to wash, and I'm not going to do it. I'm never going to wash until we go home. You'd feel much better if you were clean, Fluffy insisted, continuing to wash until his fur shone white. Then the two kittens strolled back towards the tree. Jazbury felt almost ashamed to face Yowler. After all, it wasn't his fault. It hadn't been his bird. Suddenly Fluffy stopped, his eyes wide with excitement. Look at that, he exclaimed. What? Jazbury asked. Over there, under that bush. Jazbury looked and saw a little pile of feathers lying under the bush, a wing, a tail. Fluffy sniffed around the spot. I knew it, he mewed. Yowler has been here. This is where he killed the bird and ate it. Now you'll believe me, right? Jazbury sniffed around the bush too, and could easily tell that Yowler had been there. It made him sad that their companion would play such a trick on them. When they reached the hollow tree, they found Yowler still fast asleep. Their arrival woke him. Did you catch anything? He asked eagerly. Yes, we caught a bird. Where is it? Yowler jumped to his feet. Did you bring it home? Jazbury and Fluffy exchanged glances. Then Fluffy said, no, we ate it. Ate it? Without giving me any? What do you mean by that? Aren't we partners? I brought you with me and showed you a good place to sleep, and you went and ate all the breakfast without even saving me a taste. You didn't share any of the bird you caught, Fluffy retorted. Bird I caught? What do you mean? When did I catch a bird? Before we woke up. You ate it all yourself and didn't save any for us. I don't know what you're talking about, Yowler blustered, but I'm not going to argue. If you can catch things, so can I. And I can eat them all myself, just like you. He stalked away, refusing to answer when they called after him. After that, Yowler hunted by himself, and the other kittens hunted alone. At first, Jazbury struggled to catch anything. The birds and mice always got away. He would have gone hungry or had to settle for grasshoppers and beetles, if it weren't for Fluffy. But Fluffy was a great hunter, and always managed to catch enough to eat, sharing whatever he caught with Jazbury. He was a better hunter than Yowler, and eventually Yowler suggested they all hunt together and share whatever they caught. But of course, Jazbury should have let us have the best pieces, he added, because he's no good at catching things. Yes, he is, Fluffy said firmly. He's learning, and anyway, I'd rather share with him than with you any day. You can hunt by yourself and we'll hunt by ourselves. That's how you wanted it in the first place, and now that's how we like it best. This made Yowler very angry, and he wouldn't speak to Fluffy for the whole day. Jazbury was becoming a fine hunter, better even than Fluffy. Fluffy was very skilled, but Jazbury was not only quick, he was also strong and brave, stronger and braver than the gentle Fluffy had ever imagined. Fluffy admired Jazbury greatly, and was proud of how well he caught things. One thing troubled him. Jazbury wouldn't wash himself. Every day he grew dirtier and rougher, until he looked more like a wild creature of the woods than a little town kitten, who should know better than to neglect his grooming. For a while the weather was beautiful, clear, warm and sunny, but after a week it changed. Clouds gathered, bringing a sense of rain in the air, and the wind turned chilly. The kittens huddled together at night for warmth. Yowler always claimed the cosiest spot the furthest back in the tree, where the leaves were thickest and softest. During the day he would go off on long prowls, sometimes not returning until nightfall. The other kittens grew to distrust him, but they were concerned about his frequent absences. One day Jazbury asked him to show them the way home, explaining that they were tired of being in the woods and wanted to see their dear mother and Aunt Tabby again. As Jazbury voiced this, sadness overwhelmed him, and he began to mew pitifully. Fluffy joined in, and soon both kittens cried bitterly, "Let's go home. Oh, let's go home. We don't want to stay here any longer."
Shh! Yowler snapped angrily. "I'm not going home, not for a long time. You can go if you want, but I won't." "But we don't know the way. We don't know the way," wailed the kittens. "Well, I can't help that," Yowler retorted, then stalked away, leaving them crying. And the very next night it began to rain. Yowler returned home late. Jazbury and Fluffy had already cuddled together in the tree as far back as they could go, trying to keep warm in the chilly, damp night. But as soon as Yowler arrived, he pushed them out of their snug spot and took it for himself. "Oh, Yowler, we just can't get the place warm," mewed Fluffy. "I don't care. You can find another warm spot. This is where I'm sleeping." "But I don't think that's fair," Jazbury protested. But Yowler ignored him and curled up, quickly falling asleep. Not long after, the rain started pouring down. "Oh dear," Jazbury said. "I'm getting so wet." "Listen, Jazbury," Fluffy whispered. "Yowler has the only dry spot here. Do you remember that little cave I found today under the big rock? It's not far, and I'm sure that we could stay dry there. It's not big enough for all three of us, but there's plenty of room for you and me." "Okay," Jazbury agreed. "One thing's for sure, we'll be soaked if we stay here." The two little friends crept out of the hollow without waking Yowler and quickly ran to the cave Fluffy had mentioned. It turned out to be a cosy little spot and perfectly dry, much better than the hollow of the tree. The kittens snuggled in together. Outside the rain fell hard. The leaves hung heavy with water, and the ground was soaked, but the two kittens didn't mind at all. They slept soundly through the night, as dry and comfortable as if they were in their home cellar, instead of out in the wild woods with only a rock cave for shelter. The next morning Fluffy and Jazbury were awakened by a loud meow meow. It was Yowler calling for them. "That's Yowler," Fluffy said. "He must have woken up." Jazbury stretched and stepped outside the cave. The rain had stopped and the sun shone through the leaves, but the woods were still wet. "Here we are, Yowler," he called. Yowler approached the cave, dripping wet. "Where have you been all night?" he asked crossly. "What do you mean by leaving without telling me? Look how wet I am. That's a mean trick." "Well, Yowler, we thought you were dry," Jazbury explained. "You took the only dry spot, so we came over here." "Dry spot? Do I look like I've been in a dry place? I'm soaking wet." "Well, we didn't know," Fluffy said. "Oh, be quiet. I don't care, anyway. I'm tired of the woods. I know a farmhouse nearby that needs another cat, and I'm going there to live. I met a cat from there who invited me." "Oh, but Yowler, what about us? Can we come too?" Jazbury cried. "No, you can't. They only want one cat. If you tried to follow me, they'd chase us all away." "But won't you at least show us the way home first?" begged Fluffy. "Please, please do. We're tired of the woods too, but we don't know where else to go." "Well, you'll just have to find somewhere else," Yowler said. "I did, so you can too if you try hard enough." With that he turned and stalked away through the woods. Jazbury and Fluffy followed him, mewing, until he turned on them with such ferocity that they were frightened. They stopped, watching him disappear into the woods, never looking back or saying goodbye.